in last class we saw, or we have passed successfully, the parent component value to child component, and that's why we see child component 1 value in the child component. Now we'll have the reverse, like I have some value given in the child component and you see that coming in the parent component. So what we need to work on this is, first of all I'll comment out all the previous code. I don't need any of these. I'll simply have a child component just to indicate that this is a child component, and I'll comment this one as well. Now I'll save all the files and hopefully we should not end up with an error, and that's good. Now my intention is I'll have a text box in child component. So first of all I'll have child component displayed app dash component 2. That's it, save it, and you see child component. In child component I'll have a text box, input type equal to text, and save it, and you see a text box in the child component. Now when I do the key press dot enter, when I press the enter key, I should call this function on pass, and I pass the event, and I receive this in on pass along with the event, and I say this dot. Now I need a property, component 2 property, and this property earlier we decorated it with input, now we need to decorate it with output along with an event name. And see, basically when you want to pass child data to parent, you will be using event emitter. Events is what we use, whereas in case of parent to child we used property binding and @input, and here it's @output and event binding. So this is the event name I have given along with some variable like component 2 property of type event emitter, and select it from Angular core, and string equal to new event emitter string. Okay, so you have created, and it says TS lint error, which you can say disable rule done. Okay, I'll remove this property, I don't need this, and @output, import it from Angular core. So you got all this now. Now when the event happens, when you press the key, enter key, this method comes into picture, in which you say this dot component 2 property dot emit is the method, because this is of type event emitter. And in the event emit, what you'll do is you'll pass that value. This you say event dot target dot value. You are passing this value. I'm still in child. I receive a value from the keyboard when I press enter. When that happens, this method comes into picture. In that I say emit the value, emit this value. So this emitted value someone has to receive, and that is done in the parent component, and events are handled using these brackets. And you say what is the type of event? It is of type of event name, event name. And when this is the case, you'll call on receive, on receive, and you pass that event event. And in component 1 TypeScript we say when this is the event we need to write on receive, and you say event. In this I'll have component 1 property string, and you assign this dot component 1 property equal to event, and then we'll save it. Let's see. So type something and I press enter, and I did not receive because I am not saying the interpolation of property component 1 property. Now save it. Now type something and press enter. Again I didn't receive it. Okay, so event dot target dot value. Some problem. Let me revise it. Okay, this is all formatting, not a problem. Event name and on pass. Let us see if this is coming into picture. Console.log, and you say check, only to check it. Okay, so this is a problem. This is not coming into execution. Key press dot enter. When this incident took place or when this event happens, I need to call on pass event. So here I have a problem. Why does this? Let me change the event to key down dot enter. Okay, now it worked, and we end up with an error, cannot read property. Or let's have it this way, and we'll also see what event is holding. So now I type something and press. Okay, I got the entire event, and do I have the value? Target dot, where is the value? Okay, I have event dot target dot value, and this should work. Okay, so this works and I got it. So let's see it again. What all I type, when I press enter, I see it in parent component. So this is how you can communicate values from a parent to child and from a child to parent. In this example, I have output and event emitter, and I used event binding. So these are the things we need to use. Output decorator, event emitter, and the event binding are the concepts that can help us pass child information to a parent. Till now we have seen the communication between two components, a parent passing some information to child, and the lifecycle hooks that come into execution, the ng onInit lifecycle hook on the child component. And a limitation of this lifecycle hook is it cannot identify, like, see, when I click on the button, the reinitialization happens successfully, whereas a change to the existing value, if I click on this, you don't see 3 getting changed. So this is the limitation of ng on changes lifecycle hook that can be overcome using another lifecycle hook called as doCheck. doCheck is a lifecycle hook that comes into execution in this case in component 2 on or do check, and then we'll save it. I have this one and also this one both uncommented, but when I click on it, you see only do check comes into execution. So to repeat again, the limitation of on changes is it cannot modify, it cannot change the array or the value in the array, but a reinitialization can call the ng on changes, and this limitation can be overcome in ng do check. And also ng do check comes into execution a lot, like if at all I perform the same using the text box, a click on the text box will also execute do check. So the usage of do check is a bit less used when compared to ng on changes. And the other lifecycle hook we have by default is ng on init. ng on init is quite simple. ng on init is called by Angular to indicate that a component initialization is done, and this lifecycle hook is called after ng on changes and gets executed once in a lifetime of a component, that is upon its initialization. It is the place to perform complex initializations shortly after the component gets constructed or loaded. Like if I have a console.log in which I say component 1 ng on in it, and you see I'll copy the same and paste in the component 2, and I'll name it as component 2, and I save all these. You see ng on init of component 1, ng on init of component 2 have come only for once, and if I click on it, for every click I do, ng do check comes into execution, and if I get uncommented this one and does the new reinitialization, now let's see if ng on init comes again, for a click happens. So every click I do, I get on changes and do check, but on init is something that will never come again. It's only for once throughout the life cycle of a component. So far we have seen component communication when they are in parent and child relationship using @input with property binding and @output with event binding, and also the lifecycle hooks that come into execution when the parent and child are having communication between them. We'll proceed with the same concept, that is component communication, and see a different approach. When a component is a child to a parent component, communication is possible using viewChild decorator. This example will see the usage of viewChild and how we can get the value available in component 2 in component 1's TypeScript. the view child can query the template to obtain a reference to the elements and have them injected into the component class. In detail, when a HTML file holds a custom template tag, that is the app component 2, then to get a reference to this component in TypeScript class, we say @viewChild and component1 component and a reference name component1 ref of type component1 component. Okay. Now this reference, to use it we need a different lifecycle hook, and that comes from after view init, and you are supposed to implement ng after view init. You can say console.log this dot component1 reference dot, and we need to see component2 details, but we found none. The reason is we are using component1. Instead use component2. Import it and rename it to component2, and this one also component2. And now if you rename it to component2 and then say dot, you see component2 property. So component2 property, which has component2 property value in it, and I will now able to display it in component1. Save this and see component1 is now able to display component2 property. So this accessing of component2 details from the template of component1 is possible using viewChild. ViewChild is similar to JavaScript's query selector, and ViewChildren is same as query selector all. And the next session will continue with ViewChildren.